The look on my mother's face when Dr. Hargrove called me Dr. Callahan. That was the moment I'd been waiting for, without even knowing I was waiting for it. She went completely still, her wine glass halfway to her lips, her smile frozen in place like someone had pressed pause on her. My father's brother leaned over and whispered something in her ear, and she just blinked over and over, like she was trying to reboot. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, took my seat at the table, and unfolded my napkin. Let me back up. I grew up the middle child of three, which sounds ordinary enough until you understand what that meant in my family. My older sister, Tessa, was the beauty. The one my mother dressed up for church photos, the one who got the ballet lessons and the new car at 16 and the sorority membership my parents quietly paid for. My younger brother, Kyle, was the athlete, football scholarships dangled over dinner conversations, my father's hand always on his shoulder at family gatherings. And then there was me. I was the reader, the quiet one. The one who spent summers in the public library while Tessa was at cheerleading camp. My mother used to say, not unkindly, at least not at first, that I had my nose in another world. By the time I was in high school, she'd stopped saying it kindly. You need to come out of your shell, she'd tell me. You can't just read your way through life. When I got into pre-med, I thought things might shift. I was wrong. My mother's reaction was a half smile and, well, let's see how long that lasts. My father said he was proud, but then immediately pivoted to asking about Kyle's spring tournament. I put myself through school. Loans, scholarships, 2 part-time jobs. I was a waitress at a diner called Patty's on Route 9 all 4 years of undergrad, and I worked reception at a physical therapy clinic through most of medical school. I didn't ask my parents for money. I didn't want to hear the conditions attached to it. Somewhere along the way, my family had settled on a narrative about me, and they'd told it so many times they believed it completely. I was the one who hadn't quite figured things out. Responsible, in a basic way, sure, but not ambitious. Not going anywhere special. The fact that I'd been doing my residency in Boston, that I'd passed my boards on the first attempt, that I'd just been offered a position at a cardiology practice in downtown Chicago, none of that had made it into the family story, partly because I hadn't announced it, partly because nobody had asked. My sister's engagement party was held at my parents' house in Downers Grove, a suburb west of the city where I grew up. Tessa was marrying a man named Bradford, Brad, everyone called him, who worked in commercial real estate and wore the same expression in every photo, a kind of cheerful blankness that I'd come to think of as his default setting. He seemed fine, genuinely. I had no particular feelings about Brad one way or the other. What I had feelings about was the guest list. My parents had invited the Hargroves. Dr. Elliot Hargrove was a cardiac surgeon at Northwestern. Well-known, well-respected, the kind of doctor whose name showed up in magazine features about Chicago's best physicians. His wife, Margot, was a former hospital administrator who now sat on several nonprofit boards. They were my parents' neighbors in the loose suburban sense. They lived 4 blocks away and had been to the same 4th of July parties for 15 years. They were also, completely unbeknownst to my parents, 2 of the people who had written my recommendation letters for my fellowship application. I had met Dr. Hargrove 3 years earlier at a conference in Minneapolis. We'd ended up at the same small group dinner, talked for 2 hours about a paper I'd co-authored on mitral valve repair outcomes, and stayed in touch. He'd been a mentor, in the quiet way that the best mentors operate, available when you needed them, not hovering. I had never mentioned to my parents that I knew the Hargroves. There was no particular reason, it simply hadn't come up. Now here we were. The party was in the backyard, string lights over the patio, my mother's good tablecloths on the folding tables, a catered spread from a Mediterranean place Tessa liked. 60 or 70 people milling around. My aunt from Rockford, Brad's family from Ohio, the neighbors, the church friends, the high school crowd who had somehow never fully dispersed. I arrived alone, which my mother noted within approximately 45 seconds. You didn't bring anyone, she said. It wasn't a question. No, I said. It would have been nice, she said. For pictures. I helped myself to a glass of sparkling water and went to find Tessa. My sister looked genuinely happy, which softened something in me. Whatever my feelings about the party, about my family's particular talent for making me feel invisible, I loved my sister. She'd always operated in a different orbit than me, and we weren't close in the way people imagine sisters being close. We didn't call each other every week, we didn't do girls' trips, but there was something real there underneath everything, some bedrock affection that had survived our different trajectories. You look beautiful, I told her, and meant it. You look exhausted, she said, and also meant it. We laughed. That felt good. The trouble started, as it often did, with my mother's need to perform her family for an audience. I was standing near the drink table when I heard her voice carrying across the patio, that particular projection she used when she wanted people 2 conversations away to hear her. And this is our other daughter. A pause. She's in the medical field. I turned. My mother was standing with the Hargroves. Both of them. Dr. Hargrove in a blue blazer, Margot in a cream linen dress. My mother had her hand lightly on Margot's arm, the gesture of a woman connecting 2 people she was pleased to introduce. She does medical billing, my mother said. Office work, very steady, you know. Not the glamorous side of medicine, but someone has to do the paperwork. She laughed, a bright social laugh. We always joke that she keeps the lights on behind the scenes. I watched Dr. Hargrove's face. He processed what my mother had said. His expression didn't change exactly. He was too practiced for that. But there was a shift, a very slight recalibration, like a compass needle swinging toward true north. He looked at me, and then he said, carefully, medical billing. That's right, my mother said, still smiling. Hargrove looked at me for another moment. I gave him nothing. No rescue, no correction, no widened eyes. I simply looked back at him. He said. And then, to my mother, I'm not sure I've had a chance to catch up with your daughter properly. Would you mind if I stole her for a few minutes? My mother, flattered, waved her hand. Of course, of course. He walked with me toward the far end of the patio, near the rose bushes my mother tended obsessively. When we were out of easy earshot, he stopped and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as careful amusement. Medical billing, he said again. She's not wrong that I've done paperwork, I said. He's made a sound that was almost a laugh. Your fellowship application was one of the strongest I've reviewed in the last decade. And your mother thinks you process insurance claims. My mother, I said, knows that I work in medicine. The details have never quite landed. He was quiet for a moment. Does she know about the Chicago position? No. Does she know about your research? No. He nodded slowly, not with judgment, with something more like understanding. All right, he said. I won't say anything you don't want said. I appreciated that more than I could express in that moment. I might say something, I told him. He smiled. Good. I went back to the party. I refilled my water glass, I ate a piece of spanakopita and talked to my Aunt Ruth about her garden and listened to my father tell a story about Kyle's recent rec league basketball game. Normal, ordinary, slightly suffocating family party things. And then my mother gathered everyone together for a little speech. This was her tradition at milestone events, a moment to hold the room, to weave her narrative out loud in front of witnesses. She was good at it. She had a gift for making a crowd feel warm. She talked about Tessa, about how proud she was, about how Tessa had always known what she wanted. From the time she was 6 years old, this girl had a plan. And how Brad was the culmination of that plan, a man who matched her in ambition and heart. She talked about how watching her daughter step into this chapter made her feel like a mother who had done something right. She talked about Kyle. His new job in sales, his recent promotion, how driven he was, how he reminded her of his father at that age. She did not mention me by name. I watched this happen with a kind of removed clarity, like watching weather from inside a window. I'd seen it before, I'd felt the particular ache of it before, but something was different this time, and it took me a moment to identify what. I no longer needed anything from her. That need had been gone for a while, maybe years. I just hadn't been in a room where its absence was so apparent to me. After she finished, people applauded, champagne was poured, and the small clusters of conversation reformed. I found myself standing with Brad's mother, a warm woman from Cleveland named Sandra who sold real estate and asked genuine questions. I liked her immediately. What do you do? She asked, in the simple, direct way people ask when they're actually curious. I'm a cardiologist, I said. I just finished my fellowship in Boston. I'm starting a position here in Chicago in the fall. Sandra blinked. Oh, that's wonderful. That's a serious specialty. It is, I agreed. I had no idea. Your mother said you worked in medical billing. My mother, I said pleasantly, has always had trouble keeping up with my career. Sandra laughed, a little uncertainly, and then I saw it register in her face, the recalibration, the quiet reconsideration of everything she'd been told. It was Dr. Hargrove who made it fully public, and he did it with such effortless grace that I almost missed it happening. He clinked his glass during a lull, the kind of soft, informal clink that says, I have something to add rather than I'm commanding this room. People quieted out of politeness. I just want to say, he said, that this is a lovely evening, and I have to admit, I've been remiss. I've known the Callahan family for years, and I've been a terrible neighbor, because I had no idea until tonight that the brilliant physician I've been corresponding with for the last 3 years was right here in Downers Grove all along. He looked at me. Your daughter, he said to my parents, co-authored a paper last year that I've cited in 2 of my own presentations. Her work on long-term outcomes in minimally invasive valve repair is being referenced at the national level. I had the privilege of writing one of her fellowship recommendations, and I want you to know it was one of the easiest recommendation letters I've ever written because there was simply too much to say. The patio was quiet. My mother's champagne glass was at her lips. It stayed there. My father's expression moved through several things in rapid succession: confusion, surprise, something I couldn't quite read. Tessa stared at me, and then she smiled, slowly, genuinely, the way she had when we were kids and I'd done something that surprised her. She's also Dr. Hargrove added, almost as an aside, joining the practice at Lakeshore Cardiac this fall, which means I'll finally have an excuse to drag her to more conferences. He raised his glass slightly in my direction. Congratulations on the position, it's long overdue. People started talking all at once the way a crowd does when it's processing something. My mother lowered her champagne glass, her eyes found mine across the patio. There was no anger there, no performance. Just something raw and confused, and maybe, I thought maybe, something that looked like the beginning of a question she'd never thought to ask. I walked over to her, because I'm not someone who relishes other people's humiliation, even when the other person is my mother. Because the point was never to humiliate her. The point was to exist, fully, and let the truth sit where it lands. I should have told you more, I said. I know that, she stopped, started again. You're a cardiologist, I am. Since when? Since I finished my residency 2 years ago. The fellowship was the next piece. I paused. I matched at Boston, which is why I moved. And now I'm coming back. You never said. You never asked. That landed the way I meant it to. Quietly, without venom, just the plain fact of it set down on the table between us. She looked past me, at the party, at her guests moving through the yard, at Tessa, who was now watching us with cautious attention. Medical billing, she said, almost to herself. I never told you that, you assumed it. She was quiet for a long moment, and then, in a voice much smaller than her usual one, I'm proud of you. It wasn't everything. It wasn't an apology for years of half-attention, for the silence during my graduations she didn't attend, for all the times she'd narrated my life to strangers as a footnote while centering everything else. 3 words doesn't cover that, I know that. But they were her 3 words, and they were real. I could hear it. Thank you, I said. Brad's mother found me later, near the dessert table, while my mother was talking to Margot Hargrove in a completely different register than she'd used an hour ago. Leaning in, asking questions, the full beam of her social attention finally pointed in the right direction. I owe you an apology, Sandra said. You don't, I told her. I believed what I was told. Most people do, I said. It wasn't your information to question. She pressed my hand. She had kind eyes, Brad's mother. I thought Tessa had chosen well in that specific way. I stayed until the string lights clicked on automatically as the evening turned. I ate cake. I talked to Dr. Hargrove about a paper I was hoping to start in the spring, and he mentioned a dataset I should look at, and we made a plan to have coffee in September. I hugged Tessa at the end of the night, longer than I usually did. You could have told me, she said into my shoulder. I know, why didn't you? I thought about it honestly. I think I needed to do it on my own without the audience. I pulled back enough to see her face. I didn't want it to be about them. I wanted it to just be mine first. She nodded. She got it. Tessa has always been better at understanding me than she lets on. I drove home on the Eisenhower, the city skyline coming into view as I came over the rise near the merge, all lit up against the dark. I had the windows down. It was one of those perfect early September evenings where the heat has finally broken and the air has that particular Midwestern quality, clean and wide, like the sky goes on longer than it should. I thought about what my mother had said. I'm proud of you. I thought about the look on her face, the recalibration. The moment she understood that the story she'd been telling about me wasn't the true one. And I thought about how strange it is, the way people build their narratives about the people they love, how those narratives harden, how years can pass and the story stays the same while the person inside it keeps changing, keeps growing, keeps moving quietly forward, without an audience, without a spotlight, into something their family doesn't have language for yet. My exit came up. I took it. Behind me, the skyline held its shape against the dark, patient, and certain, the way the truth always eventually is.